She was on her way to work when she was humiliated in front of everyone. But one man saw her and changed her fate. Subscribe and comment where you're watching from. The wind off the lake carried a chill through the early morning streets of Chicago, sharp and damp in the pre-dawn hours. The city was just beginning to wake, and its rhythm slow and mechanical at that hour, the roads still slick from a night of steady drizzle. The worn soles of Laura Bennett's sneakers struck the pavement with steady, measured steps. Her breath left her in pale clouds as she moved with quiet urgency down the cracked sidewalk, her work bag slung over one shoulder and a paper sack cradled in the other hand. Inside the sack was a dry sandwich from the night before, a bruised apple, and a thermos that no longer kept her coffee warm past the first 10 minutes. Still, it was breakfast, and that was more than she could afford some days. Her uniform, carefully washed and ironed the night before, was sealed in a plastic garment bag folded beneath her arm. In her jacket pocket were the cleaning gloves she used at every shift, the fingertips frayed, the palms cracked. Every item she carried had seen better days, but Laura didn't dwell on that. She didn't have time to. She was 23 years old and had been a janitor at the Grand Crest Hotel for almost 2 years. It wasn't glamorous, and it certainly wasn't easy, but it was a job, and right now she needed every dollar. Her younger brother, Josh, only 14, was still asleep in the cramped bedroom they shared in a small 2-story rental on the south side. Their parents had been killed in a highway accident 2 years ago, and there was no one else. No extended family to lean on, no safety net. Only Laura, the bills she struggled to pay, and the brother who depended on her for everything. As she neared the busy intersection at Lakeshore and East Ontario, the morning traffic began to pick up. She adjusted her grip on her bag and stepped closer to the curb to make room for others passing by. The crosswalk signal blinked red. She waited. A line of cars whooshed past, their tires hissing against the wet asphalt. A delivery truck rumbled by, followed by a pair of taxis. And then came the SUV. It was white and gleaming, clearly fresh from a detailing shop. It came too fast down the street, the driver gunning the engine as if the road belonged only to them. Laura took a step back, but it was too late. The tires sliced through a wide, deep puddle right beside her, and in an instant, a wall of icy brown water surged up and drenched her from head to toe. She froze. Her coat, her uniform, her bag, even her face, everything was soaked and speckled with grime. Her sandwich bag slipped from her hand and landed in a wet splat at her feet. She stared at it for a moment, stunned. Her breath caught somewhere between a gasp and a sob, but she didn't cry. The SUV rolled to a slow stop just past the intersection. A tinted window glided down. From behind it, a woman with sleek hair and oversized sunglasses peeked out, a cruel smile playing on her lips. She was flawless, from the shine of her lip gloss to the angle of her manicured nails wrapped around a venti green juice. "Maybe try standing back next time," she called out with a laugh that echoed above the street noise. Then the window slid up again and the SUV peeled away into traffic, leaving behind only the echo of its engine and the lingering sting of humiliation. Laura stood there for another second, water dripping from her sleeves, her shoes making soft, wet squelches as she shifted her feet. Her hands trembled, not from cold, but from something harder to name. But instead of breaking down, she bent to pick up her ruined sandwich, dumped it in the nearest trash can, and kept walking. Her head was held low, her eyes forward, her mouth a thin line. Across the street, inside a parked black car, someone had been watching. James Harper sat in the back seat, a takeaway coffee cooling in the cup holder beside him. his eyes fixed on the woman who had just been soaked. He had seen the whole thing, the speed of the car, the puddle, the way the woman behind the wheel laughed without a second thought. He knew exactly who she was. Savannah Grayson, fashion influencer, daughter of the CEO of Grayson Developments, a woman whose face had graced every luxury billboard downtown. James had met her at enough charity galas to know the way she operated: charm in public, contempt in private. But it wasn't Savannah who held his attention now. It was the girl she had splashed, the one who hadn't screamed or cursed or chased after the car, the one who had simply kept walking. James leaned forward and murmured something to his driver, who gave a quick nod and pulled out his phone. Then James sat back and stared at the foggy skyline, his thoughts already elsewhere. At the Grand Crest Hotel, Laura arrived through the staff entrance 10 minutes late. Her once clean uniform was soaked and stained. She had tried to wipe her face dry with paper towels in the restroom, but her hair was still plastered to her cheeks and her coat smelled of gutter water. As she pushed open the heavy side door, she was met with the pinched face of her floor supervisor, Mr. Denton. "You're late," he barked. "And what the hell happened to you?" "I got splashed on the way in," she began, but he raised a hand. "I'm not interested in excuses. You know guests start arriving by 7:30. The lobby's still a mess." "Yes, sir." She walked past him in silence, the weight of his disapproval heavy on her back. The cleaning closet was dim and cramped, with shelves stacked high with disinfectant and mop heads. Laura peeled off her wet coat and changed into the backup uniform she kept in her locker, 2 sizes too big and fraying at the cuffs. The moment she stepped into the hallway with her cart, the other staff took notice. One woman shook her head sympathetically, another turned away. No one said a word. No one offered to help. She started with the marble floors of the West Wing, working from corner to corner with quiet precision. Her sneakers squished with every step. She ignored the cold in her bones, the ache in her shoulders. Her mind stayed focused on the task. Wipe, polish, scrub, repeat. She whispered to herself as she worked, small prayers like breaths, each one a promise that she would get through the day. She always did. From time to time, she thought about Josh, still asleep in their apartment, his backpack probably lying unzipped by the front door. She thought about the overdue gas bill, the half-gallon of milk in the fridge, the second job she had cleaning a law office on Saturdays. There was no room for self-pity in her life, only motion, only survival. Downtown, in a high-rise tower with glass walls and minimalist decor, James Harper stood in his private office staring at the skyline. Behind him, his assistant entered quietly and laid a manila file on the desk. "This is the girl," he said. "Name's Laura Bennett, 23. Works full-time at the Grand Crest, part-time at Maxwell & Keene Law Firm. Lives in South Shore with her younger brother. No other guardians listed. Parents deceased 2 years ago." James opened the file. A photograph was paperclipped to the top, a candid shot of Laura smiling gently beside a teenage boy in a threadbare hoodie. His eyes paused on her face, on the expression that held both weariness and determination. "She didn't deserve that," he murmured. His assistant gave him a curious look. "Do you want me to do something?" James's eyes never left the photo. "Yes," he said finally, "but not yet." Back at the Grand Crest, the morning blurred into afternoon. Laura had barely paused to breathe. Her knees ached, her arms burned, but she moved from floor to floor with quiet efficiency. No one praised her. No one noticed. But the lobby gleamed, the elevator doors shone, and the air smelled faintly of citrus and polish, proof of her work. When noon struck, she stepped behind the service entrance and sat on an overturned crate to eat what little food she had left. Her hands trembled slightly as she unscrewed the lid of her thermos. The coffee inside was cold and bitter. She sipped it anyway. At the front of the building, a man paused outside the main entrance. Baseball cap pulled low, hoodie zipped halfway, sunglasses in place. James watched from the sidewalk as Laura sat alone behind the hotel, hunched over her knees, eating in silence. There was something raw and unguarded in the way she checked her phone, clearly hoping for a message. Something about her posture, the way she didn't let the world see her break, tightened something in his chest. She reminded him of someone, his mother. He turned and walked away, his hands in his pockets, but his thoughts stayed with her. He didn't know her story in full yet, but he knew one thing. This wasn't the end for her. It was only the beginning. Chapter 2. The Shadow That Watched Over Her. The day after the puddle incident began like so many others. Laura was up before sunrise, quietly moving through the apartment to avoid waking Josh. The air inside the small space was still cool, the heater ticking faintly in the corner. She packed his lunch first, 2 sandwiches, a granola bar, and a banana she hoped wouldn't be too bruised by lunch. Then her own, just a half peanut butter sandwich and a bottle of tap water. She checked her bag twice to make sure she hadn't forgotten her spare gloves or her work badge. Her only clean uniform was still soaking in a bucket of detergent in their tiny bathroom, so she slipped into the backup again, the one with the fraying collar and uneven seams. As she buttoned it up, her mind returned to the incident from the morning before. It was strange how such a brief moment could replay so often. The splash, the woman's laugh, the taste of mud on her lips. She hadn't cried about it, but the shame of it lingered, deep and sticky like the grime in her coat's lining. She thought about Savannah's face smirking from behind those giant sunglasses, and then, more curiously, about the black car that had been parked across the street. She hadn't been sure then, but now she remembered. There had been someone watching. She shook the thought away. There was no time for fantasy. The bus was late as usual, and standing in the cold drizzle without an umbrella made the ride feel even longer. But Laura arrived at the Grand Crest on time and slipped through the service entrance, ready to face another long shift. She braced herself for more whispers, more dismissive glances. When she opened her locker, however, something unexpected awaited her. A small brown paper bag sat on the bottom shelf. No name, no markings. She stared at it for a moment, puzzled, then picked it up and opened it. Inside was a pair of brand new cleaning gloves, thick, durable, professional grade. Beneath them, wrapped neatly in foil, was a warm sandwich, ham and cheese. It was still soft and fragrant, fresh from a deli, not something out of a vending machine. Tucked between the gloves and sandwich was a folded piece of paper. For the girl who works with grace, even when the world is unkind. Laura stared at the note, reading it again and again. Her throat tightened. Her fingers trembled around the edges of the bag. She looked around the locker room, but no one else seemed to notice. The others were chatting, changing, preparing for their shifts like nothing had changed. She wanted to ask, but who and why? She took a small bite of the sandwich, closed her eyes, and, for a brief, impossible moment, allowed herself to believe that someone, somewhere, cared. Up on the top floor of a downtown skyscraper, James Harper stood at the window of his office, watching the clouds break across the skyline. He held a tablet in one hand, its screen glowing with a live feed from the Grand Crest's internal cameras. ones his company had legal access to through a security partnership. He had waited for her to find the note, watched as she read it, saw the confusion and the flicker of something warmer, softer, brighter behind her eyes. Her smile was small, almost reluctant, but it stayed. He nodded to himself. Small steps. At that same moment, Savannah Grayson was seated in the makeup chair at a television studio across town. She scrolled idly through her phone while a stylist adjusted the curls in her hair. Her segment on a local talk show was about to begin, focused on her new handbag line, another extension of her increasingly commercial personal brand. She smiled wide for the cameras, flashed her signature charm, and told the host all about her vision of modern elegance with edge. But once the cameras were off, Savannah's tone turned sharp. She tossed her coffee back at her assistant. "Too cold," she snapped. "Fire the new girl." No one argued. No one even looked surprised. That was how things worked in Savannah's world. Glamour outside, ice within. Meanwhile, back at the Grand Crest, Laura's shift began with an unexpected announcement. She had just finished wiping down the entryway railing when Mr. Denton approached, clipboard in hand. "Laura Bennett," he said without preamble, "you've been reassigned. VIP floor maintenance, starting today." She blinked. "Sir? I didn't request a transfer." "It's been approved," he said, already turning away. "Better pay, less mess, don't make me regret it." As he walked off, Laura stood still for several seconds. Around her, co-workers exchanged looks. A few looked confused, others skeptical, and one in particular, Tina, a stern-faced cleaner who had been with the hotel for 6 years, looked furious. Later that afternoon, the whispers began. She must be sleeping with someone in management. Probably got some rich guest wrapped around her finger. No one gets to the VIP floor without pulling strings. Laura heard them all. She didn't flinch. She didn't respond. She told herself it didn't matter. But inside, the joy of the unexpected promotion twisted itself into something more complicated. She didn't understand why this was happening or who had made it happen. All she knew was that it didn't feel like luck. It felt like being watched. And she was right. James had returned to the hotel under a different name, checking in as a guest for the week. He wore jeans and a sweatshirt, his hair slightly longer than usual. A ball cap and glasses helped him blend in. No one recognized him. That was the way he liked it. Each day, he wandered the halls casually, sometimes sitting in the lobby with a newspaper, sometimes watching from the cafe. And always, he kept an eye on Laura. He noticed the way she mopped corners others ignored, how she offered towels to guests with genuine warmth, how she picked up wrappers that didn't belong to her station. He watched her help a guest who had dropped a phone and politely thank a bellhop who brushed past her. In a world full of people who wanted to be seen, she moved like someone who had been invisible for so long she didn't even expect to be noticed. It reminded him too much of his mother. Of those quiet evenings after her shift, her hands cracked from chemicals, her eyes heavy but soft. She never asked for anything, never complained. She built James's life with hands no one ever kissed. That night, James left another note in Laura's locker. This one was simple. "Keep going. The world sees more than you think." It wasn't signed. It didn't need to be. But as Laura's presence grew on the VIP floor, so did the resentment. Tina had always considered herself the unofficial boss among the cleaning staff. She knew the hotel inside and out. She trained new hires. She handled the trickier guests. Watching Laura rise so quickly unsettled her. To Tina, it felt like an insult, like a challenge. And so she acted. One morning, before the shift began, Tina entered the supply closet and swapped out one of the bottles on Laura's cart. She poured out the cleaning solution and replaced it with a highly concentrated floor polish, too slippery for tiled floors, especially in the main lobby. She did it with practiced hands and no hesitation. Later that morning, a guest lipped near the front desk. Not seriously injured, but shaken enough to report it. The incident caused a stir. Mr. Denton reviewed the cleaning schedule and saw Laura's name. Within minutes, she was being summoned. "I swear, I didn't do anything wrong," she told him, her voice tight with panic. Denton didn't listen. He scribbled a warning onto his clipboard and prepared the paperwork for suspension. But then, the hotel's general manager received an unusual request. James Harper had asked to review security footage from the supply room and the lobby. What they found shocked them both. The footage clearly showed Tina switching the bottles. Laura's cart untouched until the moment she began cleaning. Denton's face paled. He summoned Laura back into the office and handed her a formal apology. Tina, meanwhile, was suspended. Laura left the office in a daze. She wasn't angry, just confused, rattled, and more alone than ever. That night, as she finished her shift, she glanced around the hotel with new eyes. Somewhere in this building, someone was watching over her. Someone powerful. She didn't know why. She didn't know who. But something was happening, and for the first time in a long time, she felt like she wasn't entirely on her own. Chapter 3. The Light. They couldn't dim. After the sabotage incident, something in Laura shifted. She wasn't quite the same girl who had stood silently in the rain, soaked in mud and shame. She still moved with quiet grace, still worked with her head down and her heart steady, but the experience had left its mark. It had reminded her of how quickly people could turn, how even those who barely knew her could choose to believe the worst. Yet, more than that, it had reminded her that sometimes, just sometimes, someone out there might see you for who you truly are. She still didn't know who had helped her. The notes, the gloves, the warm sandwich, the sudden promotion, the intervention when she was wrongly blamed, it all felt surreal. A presence, unseen but constant, had been guiding her steps, watching, protecting. She didn't understand it, but she was grateful, and the gratitude became fuel. She began to stand a little taller. She smiled a little more. Her work didn't change, but her spirit did. James saw it too. From the quiet corners of the hotel, he continued to observe. At first, it had been curiosity. Then it became a kind of admiration. And now, something else entirely was forming, something deeper than he had expected. Laura wasn't just resilient. She was dignified in a way that couldn't be taught. She had turned every act of cruelty into composure, every insult into effort. He had seen her scrub marble floors with the focus of a surgeon, had watched her help an elderly guest find a misplaced key card without ever breaking her smile. She didn't just do her job, she gave the place a heartbeat. One evening, James requested her section be assigned to a private guest lounge. The request was flagged as odd. Guests didn't usually make housekeeping requests, but the manager approved it without question. Laura was summoned. She entered the lounge expecting another late-night cleanup. "No cleaning needed," the man sitting there said gently. "Just wanted to thank you for your kindness the other day." She blinked, confused. "Sir, I think you have me confused with someone else. You walked an elderly couple to the elevator last week. They couldn't stop talking about how lovely you were." She smiled awkwardly, brushing a stray hair behind her ear. "Oh, that. I was just doing my job." The man leaned back slightly. "If you could do anything in the world, what would it be?" She hesitated. The question felt oddly personal. "I suppose I'd study hospitality management, maybe run a place like this one day, but school costs money, and right now it's about survival." He nodded, storing every word. She didn't know who he really was. Not yet. Meanwhile, in a sunlit cafe uptown, Savannah was scanning her social media feed with increasing frustration. Her image, usually flawless, carefully curated, had taken a subtle hit. A blurry photo of her SUV, wheels mid-splash, had started circulating online. The caption read, "Some people think money erases manners." It wasn't tagged, it didn't mention her name, but people were putting the pieces together. Speculation swirled, comments questioned. The damage was small, but growing. She turned to her assistant, lips curled with disdain. "Who's spreading this nonsense?" Casey, the assistant, hesitated. "Maybe it's not about the photo. Maybe it's about what people are starting to see." Savannah narrowed her eyes. "Maybe you should start looking for a new job." Back at the Grand Crest, Laura found another small surprise in her locker. This time, it wasn't gloves or food, just a small bouquet of simple flowers and a handwritten note. "Keep shining. The world sees you, even if some pretend not to." The handwriting was the same as the earlier notes, still anonymous, still warm. Her chest ached with gratitude. She couldn't remember the last time someone gave her flowers. She touched one of the petals gently, and for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to feel seen. But with recognition came new attention. Some of her co-workers had started to change their tone, offering polite nods or even small smiles. Yet others grew colder. Tina had returned from her suspension quieter, but her bitterness lingered. She spoke less, but her glare said plenty, and she wasn't alone. A few others echoed her jealousy, whispering behind Laura's back. The rumor mill churned again. Laura ignored it all. She clung to the good moments, the bright ones. A thank you from a guest, a compliment from the head of housekeeping, the way her brother smiled when she told him she'd been promoted. She held those tightly, like coins in a nearly empty pocket. Then, one morning, James returned to the hotel with no disguise. He walked in like any guest, but this time, when he saw Laura in the lobby arranging flowers, he didn't hide. He walked up to her, waited until she noticed him, and smiled. "You again," she said, recognizing his face from their last meeting in the lounge. "You really like this hotel." "I like seeing things grow," he replied. She tilted her head, curious. "You're not just a guest, are you?" He laughed, not unkindly. "You're smart." Then he extended a hand. "James Harper. I'm part of the ownership group for this hotel." She froze. Her smile faded into shock. You're the James Harper?" "I'm just James," he said, his tone gentle. "And I've been watching." Her heart pounded. He continued before she could respond. "I saw what happened that day. The splash, the laugh, how you just kept walking." Her voice caught. "I didn't think anyone noticed." "I did," he said simply, "and I couldn't forget it." She looked at him, unsure what to say, but in that moment, something between them shifted. It was no longer guest and staff or investor and employee. It was two people standing on opposite sides of the same truth. That night, Savannah sat across from her father at a quiet restaurant. She looked perfect, as always. Flawless makeup, designer coat, wine glass untouched. But her words were sharp and bitter. "Someone's targeting me. That photo's everywhere. Now people are whispering, saying I humiliated some cleaner. I don't even remember her." Her father sipped his drink calmly. Maybe someone's not targeting you. Maybe they're just holding up a mirror." Savannah bristled. "I haven't done anything wrong." He looked at her over the rim of his glass. That might be the problem. Back at the hotel, another surprise waited for Laura. A scholarship folder, full tuition, a program in hospitality management starting the next month. A note inside. For the girl who never asked for anything, but deserves everything. Her hands shook, her eyes burned. She couldn't believe it. She didn't have to guess who it came from. Only one person had seen that much, given that much. She called Josh that night, voice shaking. He was quiet for a second, then said, "Told you good things happen." Word of the scholarship spread quickly. Some celebrated her, others grew suspicious again. Savannah, now desperate, paid a shady online outlet to publish a false article accusing Laura of seducing James for money. The article spread like wildfire. Laura saw it during lunch, her chest hollowed out. All the fear, the shame, the weight returned. Eyes followed her as she walked down the hall. She packed her bag and left early, unsure if she could ever come back. But James didn't stay silent. The next morning, in front of reporters and cameras, he stood on a small stage outside the Grand Crest. "Laura Bennett is not a gold digger," he said calmly. "She is one of the most honest, hard-working, and humble people I've ever met. If you doubt that, you should question what you truly value, status or character." The crowd applauded. The internet responded with force, this time on Laura's side. People reposted her story, praised her grace, her strength. Savannah's lie unraveled. Her father, furious, froze her accounts and removed her from all company dealings. "You didn't just lie," he told her. "You disgraced us all." That night, Laura received a single red rose and a note at her door. "Let the world whisper. I'll always speak your truth." She held the rose to her chest and wept. Not because of the rumors, not because of the pressure, but because someone had chosen her, defended her, believed in her. In the months that followed, Laura began attending evening classes while continuing to work at the hotel part-time. Her instructors praised her discipline. The hotel manager started inviting her to staff meetings for input. She wasn't just a cleaner anymore. She was someone with a voice, with ideas, with a future. 1 year later, the Grand Crest held its 20th anniversary gala. The ballroom shimmered with chandeliers. Every elite guest in the city was present. Laura entered in a simple blue gown. No label, no jewelry, but she didn't need them. She walked with a quiet elegance that drew eyes and silenced whispers. James was beside her, not as a benefactor, but as a man who admired her more than anyone else in the room. He hadn't proposed yet, but everyone could see it in the way he looked at her, as if the whole world disappeared when she smiled. Near the end of the evening, Laura was called to the stage. The hotel director handed her a plaque for strength, humility, and the spirit that lifted us all. She stepped up to the microphone, her hands steady. "A year ago," she began, "I was just a girl walking to work in worn-out shoes with mud on my clothes. I was invisible. Then 2 people crossed my path, one with cruelty and one with kindness. And that changed everything." The room was silent. Some wiped away tears. Even the staff, standing in the back, stood taller. Later that night, Laura returned to the corner where it had all begun. The road had been repaved. The sidewalk was clean. She took off her heels and stepped barefoot onto the pavement. James joined her, also barefoot, smiling. "What are you doing?" he asked softly. "Leaving the last trace of who I used to be," she said, "and stepping fully into who I am now." They walked forward together. not just as two people in love, but as something stronger, as proof that when the world tries to drown you in mud, it's still possible to bloom. And sometimes you bloom so brightly, the whole world has no choice but to notice. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. Watch the next video and check out the others on the channel. And if this story moved you, share it with someone.